There was one person in your soulmate's family who knew the truth long before anyone else did. They knew what happened between you. They knew why everything suddenly fell apart. And most importantly, they knew something your soulmate had never been told. But just recently, your soulmate secretly met this family member alone, and what was confessed during that private conversation changed the meaning of your entire love story. Listen carefully, because this was not an ordinary family conversation. Your soulmate didn't go there expecting some dramatic revelation. They went because questions had been building inside them for far too long. Questions about you. Questions about the separation. Questions about why something that once felt so real had ended in confusion, silence, and unanswered pain. For a long time, your soulmate had accepted the version of the story they were given. They were told that you stopped caring. They were told that you had emotionally moved on. They were made to believe that if you truly wanted this connection, you would have fought harder, spoken louder, or found some way to stay. And although a part of your soulmate never completely believed those words, hearing the same story again and again slowly created doubt. That doubt became distance. And that distance eventually became silence. But there was always one problem. Your soulmate could never fully forget you. No matter how much time passed, certain memories kept returning without warning. A conversation. A place. A promise. Something you once said. Even the smallest reminder could bring back emotions they thought they had buried. That was why this secret meeting happened. Your soulmate finally approached a family member who had been strangely quiet about your love story for years. At first, that person didn't want to talk. They avoided the questions. They changed the subject. They even told your soulmate that reopening the past would only create more pain. But your soulmate refused to leave. They looked directly at this person and asked one question. Did they really leave me the way everyone said they did? And suddenly, the room went silent. Because that family member knew they could no longer hide behind excuses. Your soulmate noticed the change immediately. The hesitation. The lowered eyes. The nervous pause before every word. Then came the confession. No. That isn't the whole story. Those words hit your soulmate harder than expected. For years, they had built their understanding of the separation around one belief, that somehow you had chosen to walk away. But now someone from their own family was telling them that belief was incomplete. The family member admitted that there had been conversations your soulmate never knew about. Conversations about you. Conversations about whether you were right for the family. Conversations about the future. And decisions had been made while both you and your soulmate were completely unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. Your soulmate immediately asked, "What decisions?" The family member became emotional. Because answering that question meant exposing people they had protected for years. They admitted that certain members of the family had been afraid of how serious your connection was becoming. They saw how deeply your soulmate cared about you. They saw that your soulmate was beginning to make decisions based on a future that included you. And that frightened them. Not necessarily because you had done something wrong, but because they feared losing control over the future they had imagined for your soulmate. So instead of confronting the relationship openly, pressure began quietly. Words were twisted. Small misunderstandings were made bigger. Your silence was interpreted in the worst possible way. Your actions were questioned. And whenever your soulmate tried to defend you, another doubt was placed in their mind. Slowly, something beautiful became surrounded by suspicion. But then the family member revealed something even more painful. There was a moment when you apparently tried to make things right. A moment your soulmate never knew about. You had not simply disappeared. You had not simply forgotten. According to this confession, there had been an attempt from your side to reach across the distance. But the truth of that attempt never reached your soulmate in the way it should have. Your soulmate froze. What do you mean? The family member struggled to answer. Then they admitted that information had been withheld. Something meant to show your soulmate that you still cared was never fully explained. And suddenly your soulmate began remembering everything differently. The waiting. The confusion. The nights they wondered why you never came back. The anger they carried because they believed you had given up. Now one terrible possibility stood in front of them. What if you had been waiting too? What if both of you had been hurting on opposite sides of a story neither of you completely understood? Your soulmate's voice reportedly became quiet when they asked the next question. Did they know what was happening? The family member shook their head. Not all of it. And that answer changed something inside your soulmate. Because for years, they had secretly blamed you for choices that may never have been entirely yours. They had replayed the ending again and again, imagining all the things you could have done differently. But they had never seriously considered that you might have been confused too, that you might have been receiving a completely different version of events. That while they were wondering why you weren't fighting for them, you may have been wondering exactly the same thing. Don't skip this part, because this is where the confession became deeply personal. The family member looked at your soulmate and admitted something they had carried with guilt for a very long time. I should have told you sooner. Your soulmate asked why they didn't. And the answer was simple. Fear. They were afraid of creating conflict inside the family. Afraid of being blamed for bringing you back into the conversation. Afraid that telling the truth would expose decisions people wanted buried forever. So they stayed silent. Days became months. Months became years. And eventually, the truth became harder to reveal because too much time had passed. But your soulmate asked something that broke the family member emotionally. Did they love me? There was no hesitation this time. Yes, point one word. But it destroyed years of assumptions. Your soulmate had spent so much time wondering whether the connection had meant as much to you as it meant to them. And now someone who had witnessed parts of the story from inside the family was confirming what your soulmate had desperately wanted to know: you cared. The connection had been real. And the ending may not have happened for the reasons your soulmate had been led to believe. But that still wasn't the confession that changed everything. Because before your soulmate left, the family member revealed one final detail. Something they had never told anyone. They admitted that shortly before everything completely fell apart, someone inside the family had asked them to keep one specific truth away from your soulmate. A truth directly connected to you. Your soulmate immediately demanded to know what it was. The family member hesitated again. Then they said, "There is something about the last time they tried to reach you that you were never supposed to find out." Your soulmate stopped breathing for a moment. Because suddenly this was no longer only about the past. There was something specific. Something hidden. Something that could explain the exact moment your love story changed direction. And the family member knew all of it. Your soulmate moved closer and asked them to tell the entire truth. No protection, no excuses, no more family secrets. The family member agreed. But before speaking, they gave your soulmate one warning. "Once I tell you what really happened, you may never look at your family, or your separation from them, the same way again." Your soulmate didn't move. For several seconds, they simply stared at the family member sitting across from them, trying to prepare themselves for whatever was about to be revealed. But nothing could have prepared them for the next sentence. The family member finally said, "The last time they tried to reach you, they were not trying to say goodbye." Your soulmate's expression changed instantly. Because for years, they had believed the exact opposite. They had been told that your final attempt at contact was simply closure. That you had already accepted the ending. That whatever you once felt had faded, and that there was no reason to reopen something you had supposedly chosen to leave behind. But now the family member was saying that story had never been true. Your soulmate leaned forward and asked, "Then what were they trying to tell me?" The answer came slowly. They wanted to fix it. Those 4 words shattered something inside your soulmate. Suddenly, memories they had spent years trying to forget came rushing back. The days when they kept checking for some sign from you. The nights when they wondered whether you were thinking about them. The moments when they almost reached out themselves but stopped because they believed you had already made your decision. All that time, they thought you had chosen silence. But according to this family member, you had actually been trying to break it. Your soulmate immediately wanted details. When did it happen? What exactly had you said? Who knew? And why had none of it reached them? The family member lowered their eyes and admitted that your attempt to reconnect had created panic inside the family. Because by that point, certain people believed the separation was finally permanent. They believed your soulmate was beginning to accept life without you. And they were terrified that one honest conversation between the two of you could undo everything. So your attempt to reconnect was treated like something dangerous. Not because you were dangerous, but because the truth was. If your soulmate had heard directly from you, there would have been no one standing between your words and their heart. No interpretation. No warning. No one explaining what you really meant. Just you and them. And apparently, someone did not want that conversation to happen. Your soulmate's eyes filled with disbelief. They asked the family member directly, who stopped it? But the family member refused to give a name immediately. Instead, they explained what happened. Someone discovered that you were still trying to reach your soulmate. And instead of allowing the message to reach them naturally, that person stepped between the two of you. Your intentions were questioned. Your words were reduced to something they were never meant to be. And your soulmate was given the impression that reopening communication would only cause more pain. Meanwhile, you were left with the impression that your soulmate wanted distance. Two people. Two completely different versions of the same moment. And one silence growing between them. Your soulmate stood up and walked across the room. They were angry now. Not only with the people involved. They were angry with themselves. Because they began remembering moments when their own heart had told them something wasn't right. There had been nights when they almost ignored everyone and contacted you. There had been moments when your name appeared in their thoughts so strongly that they wanted to ask you directly what had happened. But each time, fear stopped them. What if you rejected them? What if everyone else had been right? What if contacting you only proved that they were the one who couldn't let go? So they remained silent. And now they were discovering that you may have interpreted that silence as rejection. That realization hurt more than anything. Because suddenly your soulmate understood something they had never considered before. Maybe both of you had been waiting for the other person to make a move. Maybe both of you believed the other had already walked away. Maybe the relationship didn't die because the love disappeared. Maybe it collapsed because neither person was given the full truth. Don't skip what happened next, because your soulmate asked the one question the family member had been hoping to avoid. Were you part of it? The family member's eyes immediately filled with tears. And that silence was the answer. Your soulmate stepped back. They couldn't believe it. This was someone they trusted. Someone who had watched them suffer. Someone who had seen them trying to understand why you disappeared from their life. And all along, this person knew there was more to the story. The family member began apologizing. They explained that they had never intended to destroy anything. At the time, they believed they were protecting your soulmate from conflict. They had been told that your relationship would eventually create problems within the family. They had been convinced that keeping quiet was the safest choice. But as time passed, they began realizing what their silence had actually done. They watched your soulmate become different. More guarded. More hesitant about love. Less willing to trust their own feelings. And every time your soulmate mentioned you, the guilt became heavier. Still, they said nothing. Until now. Your soulmate asked, "Why tell me today?" The family member wiped their tears and said something your soulmate would never forget, "Because I can't watch you make another life-changing decision without knowing what really happened." That sentence changed the atmosphere completely. Another life-changing decision? Your soulmate immediately asked what they meant. But instead of answering directly, the family member reached into a drawer. They pulled out something old. Something they had apparently kept hidden for a very long time. Your soulmate recognized your name immediately. Written across the front. Their hands began shaking. Because whatever was inside had survived all these years. The family member placed it on the table and said, "This should have reached you a long time ago." Your soulmate couldn't touch it at first. They simply stared. Years of unanswered questions were sitting directly in front of them. Finally, they picked it up. And before opening it, they asked, "You kept this?" The family member nodded. "I was told to get rid of it." Your soulmate looked up sharply. "But you didn't?" "No." "Why?" The family member took a long breath. "Because something inside me knew there might come a day when you needed to know that they never abandoned you the way you believed." That was the moment your soulmate broke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. They simply covered their face as tears began falling. Because they had spent years trying to make peace with losing someone they once deeply loved. They had forced themselves to accept an ending that never completely made sense. And now, sitting in front of them, was proof that there had always been another side to the story. Your soulmate finally opened what had been kept from them. The first few words were enough to make them stop. Because whatever you had written, or whatever message had been preserved there, was not angry. It was not cold. It was not goodbye. It was filled with something your soulmate had convinced themselves no longer existed. Hope. You had wanted a conversation. You had wanted the misunderstandings cleared. You had wanted one opportunity for both of you to speak without anyone else interfering. And most painfully, you had apparently made it clear that if your soulmate truly wanted the relationship to end, you would respect that decision. But you wanted to hear that decision directly from them. Not through someone else. Your soulmate read that part again. And again. Because suddenly they realized something devastating. They had never told you directly that they wanted you gone. And you had never told them directly that you wanted to leave. Yet somehow both of you ended up believing exactly that. Your soulmate whispered, "We never actually chose this." The family member couldn't answer. Because there was nothing left to defend. But then your soulmate reached the final part. And their entire expression changed. There was one sentence near the end that the family member had been especially afraid for them to see. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a question. A question meant only for your soulmate. And after reading it, your soulmate closed their eyes because they finally understood why someone had wanted this hidden. You had asked whether they were willing to meet you one final time, face to face, before allowing other people to decide what your relationship meant. You had given them the choice. But they had never received it. Your soulmate looked at the family member and asked quietly, "What would have happened if I had seen this?" The family member answered through tears, "I think you would have gone to them." Silence. And everyone knew that? Another silence. Then came the answer. Yes. That was the confession that changed everything. Because now your soulmate understood that the greatest tragedy of your love story might not have been rejection. It might have been a choice they were never allowed to make. They had not chosen to ignore you. They had never been given the chance to answer. And now, after all this time, they were holding the truth in their hands. But one question remained. Why had this family member decided to reveal everything right now? Why today? Why after keeping it hidden for so long? Your soulmate asked exactly that. And the family member's answer created an entirely new fear. Because someone found out I still had this, your soulmate froze. Who? The family member looked toward the door as if they were suddenly afraid someone might hear them. Then they lowered their voice. The same person who made sure it never reached you the first time. Your soulmate's face went pale. Because that person was still close to them. Still involved in their life. Still pretending they knew nothing about what had happened between you. And according to the family member, they had recently discovered that your soulmate had started asking questions about you again. That meant this secret meeting was no longer secret. Someone knew the truth was coming out. Someone knew your soulmate now had what had been hidden for years. And before your soulmate could ask another question, the family member said something even more disturbing. There's one more thing you need to know before you contact them. The person who separated you didn't do it alone. Your soulmate stared at them. The family member continued. There was another person involved. Someone you trusted even more. And when your soulmate finally heard who that second person was, they couldn't believe the name. Your soulmate stared at the family member, waiting for the name. They thought they were prepared for anything now. After everything they had just discovered, they believed nothing else could possibly hurt more. They were wrong. When the second person's identity was finally revealed, your soulmate immediately shook their head. No. That can't be true. Because this wasn't some distant relative. This wasn't someone they barely knew. This was someone your soulmate had trusted during the exact period when your relationship was falling apart. Someone who had listened when your soulmate cried. Someone who had offered advice. Someone who had repeatedly said, "You need to stop waiting for them." And now your soulmate was discovering that this person may have known far more than they ever admitted. The family member explained that the interference had not happened in one dramatic moment. It happened slowly. A sentence here. A warning there. A carefully planted doubt. Whenever your soulmate started believing that maybe they should contact you, this trusted person would give them another reason not to. They've probably moved on. Maybe you should protect your dignity. If they really wanted you, they would find a way. Those words sounded like advice at the time. Now they sounded completely different. Your soulmate began replaying old conversations in their mind. And suddenly they remembered something that made their stomach turn. There had been one evening when your soulmate had decided they were going to contact you directly. No family involvement. No advice. No asking anyone's permission. They simply wanted to hear the truth from you. But before they could do it, this trusted person had appeared with information that changed their mind. They claimed you had already made your choice. They claimed you were no longer waiting. And your soulmate believed them. Now they asked the family member, was that true? The answer came immediately. No. Your soulmate closed their eyes. That single word reopened years of pain. Because that night could have changed everything. One call. One honest conversation. One moment without interference. That might have been enough. Instead, your soulmate walked away believing they were protecting themselves from rejection. And you may have walked away believing your soulmate had made a deliberate choice not to answer. But your soulmate still needed to understand the motive. Why? They demanded. Why would someone I trusted do that? The family member hesitated. Because this was the part they had feared revealing most. It wasn't simply that someone disliked you. It wasn't jealousy in the obvious sense. It wasn't even hatred. It was control. Certain people had already imagined a different future for your soulmate. A future that fit their expectations. A future that kept your soulmate close to the family. A future where important decisions remained predictable. But your relationship with your soulmate had begun changing that. Your soulmate had started thinking independently. They had started questioning expectations they once accepted without resistance. And there had even been conversations about building a future that might require your soulmate to choose their own happiness over what everyone else wanted. That frightened people. Because they realized your soulmate wasn't just falling in love. They were becoming willing to make their own choices. And somehow, you became the symbol of that independence. Your soulmate slowly sat back down. For the first time, they understood why so much pressure had surrounded the relationship. Maybe it had never been entirely about whether you were good enough. Maybe the real fear was what your soulmate might become if they stopped living according to everyone else's expectations. The trusted person apparently believed separating the two of you would eventually return everything to normal. They thought your soulmate would hurt for a while. Then move forward. Then choose the future everyone had prepared for them. But something unexpected happened. Your soulmate never completely moved on. They tried. They smiled when expected. They continued with life. They even convinced themselves for periods of time that the past was finally behind them. But whenever serious decisions about love and commitment appeared, something inside them pulled back. Because deep down, one question had never disappeared. What really happened between us? And now they finally knew. Don't skip this moment, because what your soulmate did next shocked the family member. They stood up, took the hidden message with them, and said, "I need to speak to this person." The family member immediately tried to stop them. "Not yet." Why? Because they don't know how much you know. Your soulmate turned around. For years, fear had kept them silent. But this time something had changed. "I've spent enough time being protected from my own life." The family member had no answer. Your soulmate continued. "I was told what to believe. I was told what they supposedly felt. I was told what was best for me. And I never once asked the one person who actually had the answers." They looked down at your name. Then said quietly, "I should have asked them." That realization carried both regret and determination. Because your soulmate understood that confronting the past wasn't necessarily about rebuilding what had been lost. It was about finally knowing what was real. They wanted to hear your side directly. No relatives. No trusted friends. No messengers. No interpretation. Just the truth. But before your soulmate could leave, the family member stopped them one last time. "There is something else." Your soulmate almost laughed from disbelief. How can there possibly be something else? The family member walked toward another room. When they returned, they were carrying a small box. Unlike the first hidden message, this was something your soulmate immediately recognized. They had seen it before. Years ago. Around the exact time your relationship began falling apart. Your soulmate's hands went cold. "Where did you get that?" The family member admitted that it had been left behind during one of the final days when everything was collapsing. Your soulmate believed it had disappeared, but someone had kept it. Inside were small reminders of your connection. Nothing expensive. Nothing dramatic. But emotionally, they were priceless. A photograph. A small note. Something connected to a memory only the two of you would fully understand. And beneath everything else was another folded piece of paper. Your soulmate picked it up. The family member said, "I never opened that one." Your soulmate unfolded it carefully. This message was different. It was shorter. There was no long explanation. No attempt to defend anything. Just a few deeply personal words written during a moment when you apparently believed your soulmate had already chosen to let you go. Your soulmate read it once. Then again. Their eyes filled with tears. Because the message made one thing painfully clear. You had been hurting too. While your soulmate thought you had forgotten them, you were trying to understand why everything had suddenly changed. While your soulmate thought they had been abandoned, you were questioning whether you had ever truly been given a chance. The two of you had been grieving the same connection from opposite sides. Your soulmate pressed the paper against their chest and whispered, "How did we let this happen?" The family member answered quietly, You didn't do it alone. And those words mattered. Because your soulmate was beginning to separate regret from truth. Yes, both of you had made mistakes. Yes, there had been silence. Yes, perhaps either of you could have pushed harder for answers. But now there was evidence that outside interference had made that silence much harder to break. Your soulmate asked whether you had ever discovered what really happened. The family member shook their head. As far as I know, they never knew the whole truth. That answer changed your soulmate's next decision. They no longer wanted only to confront the person who interfered. They wanted to find you. But they were terrified. Too much time had passed. Your life might be completely different now. You might not want the past reopened. You might have healed. You might have finally found peace. And your soulmate knew they had no right to simply appear and demand another chance. So instead, they made a quieter decision. They would not approach you asking for love. They would approach you offering truth. If you wanted nothing more, they would respect it. If you wanted answers, they would give you everything they now knew. And if there was even one question you had carried all these years, your soulmate wanted you to finally have the answer. But just as your soulmate prepared to leave, their phone vibrated. One message. From the very person whose name had just been exposed. Your soulmate looked at the screen. The message was short. I know where you are. Please don't do anything until you hear my side. Your soulmate slowly looked up at the family member. Neither of them spoke. Because now there was no doubt. The person knew. They knew the secret meeting had happened. They knew the hidden message had been revealed. And they knew your soulmate was finally close to discovering everything. Then another message arrived. This one was even more shocking. There is a reason we kept you two apart, and it isn't the reason you've just been told. Your soulmate stared at those words. Anger disappeared for a moment. Now there was confusion. What other reason could there possibly be? The family member looked frightened. Because apparently, they didn't know either. Your soulmate typed only one response. Then tell me the truth. The reply came almost immediately. Not over the phone. Come alone. And bring what you found. Your soulmate looked down at the old message in their hand. Every instinct told them that something bigger was still buried underneath this story. But this time, they refused to allow anyone else to decide what they were allowed to know. They placed the message safely inside their pocket and headed toward the door. The family member called after them. Be careful. If they're finally willing to confess, there may be something none of us knew. Your soulmate stopped for 1 second. Then turned back and said, "That's exactly why I have to go." Because after years of silence, your soulmate was finally going to stand face to face with the person who helped separate you. And what that person was about to confess would reveal whether your love story had been destroyed by control, fear, or a secret that had been buried from both of you. Your soulmate arrived at the meeting place carrying the one thing that should have reached them years ago. Their hands were steady, but inside, everything was moving at once: anger, regret, fear, and a strange kind of hope they didn't yet trust. The person was already waiting. For years, this had been someone your soulmate believed was on their side. Someone who had offered comfort during the worst moments. Someone who had watched them question what went wrong between you. Now your soulmate knew that this same person had helped shape the silence that separated you. There was no warm greeting. No pretending. Your soulmate placed the hidden message on the table between them and asked only one question. Why? The person looked at it and immediately understood. For several seconds, they said nothing. Then they whispered, "So you finally found it." Your soulmate felt anger rise instantly. You knew this existed? Yes. You knew they were trying to reach me? Yes. And you let me believe they had walked away? The person lowered their eyes. That was enough. Your soulmate stood up. Years of confusion suddenly had a face. Every night they had questioned their worth. Every moment they had wondered why you didn't fight harder. Every time they had forced themselves to stop hoping. This person had known there was another side to the story. You watched me blame them, your soulmate said. You watched me blame myself. And you said nothing. The person finally looked up. I thought I was protecting you. From what? That question changed everything. Because the person didn't answer with the explanation your soulmate expected. They didn't mention family expectations. They didn't mention control. They didn't say you were considered wrong for them. Instead, they said, from a decision you were about to make before you knew everything. Your soulmate froze. What decision? You were ready to leave everything behind for them. Your soulmate remembered. There had been a period when the connection between you had become so serious that they were considering major changes. They had imagined choosing a future based on love rather than expectation. They had even considered standing against people they had never challenged before. But that still didn't explain the deception. So you lied to me because you didn't agree with my decision? No. Then why? The person took a deep breath. Because someone came to us with information about them, your soulmate's expression changed. What information? At the time, we believed it. Those words immediately created another question. At the time? The person nodded slowly, because later, I discovered that some of it may never have been true. Your soulmate sat back down. Now the anger was mixed with disbelief. They demanded everything. No more partial explanations. No more protecting names. Whatever this was, it reached further back than the separation. Further back than the family interference. Possibly even further back than your entire relationship. Your soulmate demanded an explanation. But the caller refused. Not like this. Then how? I'll meet you. But there's one condition. Your soulmate almost laughed bitterly. No more conditions. You'll want to hear this one. What is it? The caller paused. Then said the one thing your soulmate never expected. Don't come alone. Your soulmate frowned. Who do you want me to bring? There was another long silence. And then the answer came. Bring them. Your soulmate stopped breathing. You. After all these years, after all the hidden conversations, manipulated information, unanswered messages, and decisions made by other people, someone was finally demanding that the two people at the center of the story stand in the same room. Your soulmate whispered, I don't even know if they'll speak to me. The caller answered quietly. Then tell them you finally found what they tried to send you. If they still want the truth after all this time, they'll understand why this meeting matters. The call ended. Your soulmate remained standing there, staring at the phone. And suddenly the most frightening part of this entire journey was no longer confronting the family. It wasn't exposing the person who interfered. It wasn't even discovering what secret existed before your relationship began. It was contacting you. Because now your soulmate had to find the courage to do something they should have done years ago. Speak to you directly. No middle person. No assumptions. No family voices. No one deciding what either of you meant. Just one honest message. Your soulmate opened your old contact. Their finger hovered over your name. They typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. How could a person fit years of regret into one message? How could they explain that the story both of you believed might have been built on incomplete truths? Finally, your soulmate stopped trying to explain everything. They wrote only what mattered. I found what you tried to send me years ago. I never received it. I know that now. And there is something I believe both of us deserve to hear together. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm only asking whether you want the truth. Your soulmate stared at the message for a long time. Then pressed send. And for the first time in years, the silence between you was no longer being controlled by someone else. Now the choice belonged to you. Minutes passed. No answer. Then more time. Your soulmate began wondering whether the number even still belonged to you. But suddenly, the screen changed. A reply had arrived. Your soulmate opened it. And after reading your first words to them in years, tears immediately filled their eyes. Because your response revealed something they never imagined. You had kept something from that final chapter too. Something your soulmate had never known. And if both of you were finally willing to put your pieces of the story together, the truth behind your separation was about to become impossible for anyone to hide again. Your soulmate read your reply again, and suddenly everything they had believed for years began to collapse. You admitted that you had kept one final piece of the story because you believed they had deliberately chosen to leave you behind. But when your soulmate told you about the hidden message, you finally understood that neither of you had ever received the complete truth. For the first time in years, you agreed to speak directly. There were no family members between you, no trusted friends explaining your feelings, and no one controlling the conversation. Your soulmate apologized for believing what others had said without asking you first. And you admitted that your own pain had eventually convinced you that silence was the only answer left. Then both of you attended the meeting together. The person who had interfered could no longer hide behind different versions of the story. They finally confessed that fear, assumptions, and manipulated information had been used to push the two of you apart. But the biggest revelation was that there had never been one undeniable truth proving your relationship needed to end. People had acted on suspicion, and those suspicions had slowly become a story everyone treated as fact. Your soulmate looked at you with tears in their eyes because years had been lost to something neither of you had truly chosen. Yet neither of you tried to pretend the past could simply be erased. Too much time had passed, and both of you had changed. So your soulmate made no dramatic promise and asked for no immediate second chance. They simply said, "I wish I had asked you instead of believing everyone else." And you finally gave them the answer they should have heard years ago. "I never wanted strangers to decide our ending." That sentence brought your soulmate to tears. Because whatever happened next, the greatest question of your love story had finally been answered. The connection had not disappeared because one of you suddenly stopped caring. It had been buried beneath silence, fear, interference, and words that never reached the people they were meant for. Now the truth belonged to both of you, and nobody else could rewrite it again. Whether this became a new beginning or simply the closure both hearts deserved would be a decision made only by you and your soulmate. And perhaps that was the real meaning behind this confession. Sometimes love does not need another promise first, it needs the truth that was missing all along.